Welcome to the first video of the Lunging Basics series. We are here with Rose. She's a 7-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred, and we are going to just talk about the basics of equipment and basics of position with the lunging on a horse. So as we get into this series, we're going to talk more about the different equipment you can be using, and we can also talk about different problems that might arise, whether you are learning how to lunge or your horse is learning how to lunge. Some of the basic equipment that you're going to need is you're going to need a lunge whip if your horse will tolerate it. One of the things we want to make sure is that our horse is very comfortable with that lunge whip. You should be able to touch everywhere with your lunge whip, and your horse shouldn't react in fear, because we don't ever use the lunge whip to hit the horse. We're just going to use the lunge whip as an extension of your arm to kind of like be able to shoo them along or encourage them to go forward. The next thing that you need is a lunge line. And the lunge line, this is from Shires. This is one of my favorites. It's a cotton lunge line, and it has just a little bit of give, but it also has a nice, secure, strong clasp, and then a loop at the end if you need to catch. And when you have your lunge line, you want to make sure that it is looped like this, so your hand doesn't ever get wrapped up or caught in it, because that's an excellent way to break a hand or break fingers. I've seen people, or I've not seen people, but I've heard of people, and I have friends that have had a broken hand because they got their hand caught up in either a lunge line or a lead rope. So you want to make sure that safety is first. Another thing that you're going to need is like a normal halter will be just fine. You can use a rope halter, you can use a leather halter, you can use a nylon halter. The one thing that I would suggest, if your horse is a little bit of a puller on the lunge line, they like to kind of pull away from you a little bit, having a rope halter is going to be a little bit more like a stronger aid than having a nylon or like a flat halter. The other thing you can do is also lunge them in a bridle. I try to lunge them only in a snaffle bridle, just because it's a simple mouthpiece, and that way there's just not a lot of confusion with any kind of other specialty bit. So this particular horse, Rose, she is ridden in a hackamore, so we don't typically put a bit in her mouth. So she lunges just in the rope halter if she's not being lunged right before she rides. She is a little bit of a late start, so she does tend to get a little bit of lunge within, or a little bit of lunge before she rides. When we do that, we just lunge her in her hackamore bridle. Occasionally I will put the rope halter over the bridle if I feel like she's going to be a little bit rambunctious that day. That way she's not pulling on that hackamore bridle, she's just pulling on the little bit stronger rope halter. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the positioning of the lunge line, or a positioning of a lunging horse. Okay, so when you are lunging a horse, what you want to make sure is that you have everything kind of in order before you send your horse off. The most dangerous position you can be in when you're lunging a horse is actually that first couple of steps when your horse gets sent away from you. I have been in a situation where I had a horse that was very excited to get out and lunge one morning. He was kind of a young, kind of hot gelding, and one of the things that he would do is when he would kind of like step off away from you, he would kind of like run out and he would kick out, and it was always kind of a kick out toward the lunger. He wasn't trying to kick like the person lunging him, but you were kind of in a dangerous position if you weren't paying attention. So one of the things that I do when I send a horse out is I make sure I have my whip in my backhand. The backhand is going to be the one that is closest to their tail, and then your front hand is going to be the hand that's closest to their head. I typically will step out of their space, give them room, and then send them forward. You can tell how excited she is to be out. So there, when she didn't want to move forward, one of the things that I did was I just kind of swung the whip and slapped the ground with it behind her. I don't want to actually kind of like hit her, really. I just kind of want to encourage her to go forward. Now she can be rather lazy some days, so having the whip is definitely a needed thing, but some horses don't need that whip. So when we're talking about basic positioning, you want to think about the horse being in a little bit of a V away from you, or a triangle. Okay, so we're gonna have my whip pointing at her tail, my hand pointing at her head, and my chest pointing right at her shoulder. You can kind of step into different positions. So if I step a little bit closer to her hind end, I'm a little bit more of a driving force. If I step a little closer to her shoulder, I'm more of a neutral source. And then if I step forward by her head, it's going to be more of a stopping force. Now, if you have kind of a lazy horse, you want to try to stay away from that head and shoulder region, but you want to be closer to their hind end, just because you have to always be kind of driving them forward. And I always kind of think about turning my body to where my shoulder is kind of pointing toward their tail a little bit. Now, if you have kind of a naughty horse that likes to flip around on you, you want to make sure that you are standing as even with their hind end and their tail as possible. That way that they can't flip around on you. When we are deciding to send them out a little bit, there are a couple different cues that you can use. So when I have them going around in a circle and I want them to go out, all I'm going to do is kind of flick the whip toward the horse's shoulder or their rib cage, and you can say out. And if they don't move out, what you're going to do is step toward them and send them out. Now, you notice that my whip did actually touch her rib cage. It did not flicker hard. She's not going to have any kind of welt or anything like that. I just kind of sent her out just like I would if I went to push her with my hand. Oh, and walk. Oh. So we're not going to talk necessarily about voice cues too much today, other than that out cue. And so to practice that, I'm going to send her forward with my voice, just a little cluck and a little, lift of my lunge whip. I'm just going to take my hand and I'm just going to just reel her in, kind of like a fishing line. All right, so she's pretty close to me. She already kind of knows what's up. She knows she's going to go out. So all I'm going to do is just kind of get past you guys. I'm just going to take my whip and just kind of lift it like this and say out, and then just give her that extra line and then send her out. Now that she's kind of paying attention to my cues, she's very readily willing to go outside. Now, one of the things when we're talking about position that we want to make sure is another safety thing, but this is more for the horse, is make sure this lunge line stays off the ground. Now, you'll notice that sometimes is like she comes in, like I'm going to let it touch the ground here. So the whip the line touches the ground a little bit, but then I just either pick it back up or I send her out to get that line back up off the ground. What you don't want to do is let that line hang on the ground to where they can kind of put their foot over it. Obviously, with a little bit of a lazier horse, I'm not going to be quite as picky about where the line is. I'm always going to keep it in a safe position. But if it touches the ground for one step, I'm not going to be like, oh, get that line up off the ground. But if I have a horse that is really rambunctious, they're kind of flinging their feet around, I am going to be a little bit more cognizant of where that line is, making sure it doesn't get in a place where they can step over it or step on it. I have had horses that step over that line. It happens to everybody. You just have to stay really calm in that situation. Bring the horse down to a manageable gait, so like a walk or a halt, and get them all untangled. One of the things that is really helpful before you start lunging is making sure that your horses are not worried about things being around their legs, and make sure that they kind of have a good head on their shoulders, because you don't want to get in a situation where both could get hurt, one or both of you could get hurt. Okay, so as I'm walking around, I'm just making sure that I'm staying nice right at her hip. I'm not going to let her out too far, just so I can keep her in your guys' view. And I'm going to just send her up into a trot. And what I want to be careful is that I stay right in the middle of my circle. So you can see I have a marker here. The true reason for the marker is so I know where the center of the view is for the camera. But it also is really helpful to have that marker because it keeps you in the center of your circle to start. Like without the camera, it keeps you in the center of your lunge circle. You can walk with the horse. I will show that to you here in a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to stay kind of in the middle. I tend to be a walker just because I tend to migrate with the horse. If I don't walk, if I try to stay in one spot, I'd somehow end up really migrating. So I tend to walk in a small circle around like my center spot. So I'm going to send her up into the trot. So I'm just going to step toward her a little bit to drive a little bit. And then I'm going to move back to my marker. And you can see as she's trotting around, I'm staying right at her hip. And she's trotting around me. Now, she's pretty nice on the lunge at this point in her training, where she's not yanking and pulling. So I don't have like a really like hard grasp on the lunge or on the lunge line. If I need a horse that is, or if I have a horse that is a bit of a puller, I just change my hand positioning to be like holding a rein. So my thumb's on top of it, and the line goes through my hand and out between me and my ring finger, and that's going to give me a really solid hold on the lunge line. Now for her, when she does start cantering, she tends to be a little bit more pulley, but she's honestly, she's a pretty good girl. So even in the canter, as she just decided she was going to canter, I'm going to just stay in my positioning. Lunging is actually quite easy because you really just kind of stay in one spot as long as you're doing basic work. You can see how she travels along. Now, if I get into a weird position, so if I step forward by her nose, you can see how she's kind of like, what is happening? And she actually she's really hard to get up by her nose. All right, so right now I'm kind of even with her nose, and you can kind of see how she's just a little bit like, what is happening? And you see how she slows down right there. Okay, so when I'm up by her nose like that, and not like physically up by her nose, I'm just talking about the alignment where I'm not even with her hip, I'm even with her nose. It's kind of a whoa force. It's a backwards driving force. And what happens is the horse wants to slow down. So it's very useful if you have a horse that is really energetic and it's trying to run, or you can't get it to slow down. You can change your positioning to help slow them down. Not every horse will listen to it. But eventually they kind of tune in and are like, what is happening? For now, we're going to go ahead and stay nicely at her hind end. We're going to send her back up into the trot. And I'm just going to stay right here. And this time I'm actually going to send her up into the canter. You can kind of watch how I use my whip and how I use my body. Notice that I'm always kind of angled toward her head, but my shoulder and my chest is even with her hip. Oh, easy, easy. All right, so when I want her to canter, I'm going to kind of give her a little bit of a flick with the whip and then just send her up into the canter. Now, my horses are all trained for a cluck for the trot and a kiss for the canter. So typically that's all I have to do. However, if I have one that I have to kind of push, I will use my body a little bit more, I'll use my whip a little bit more, and I'll use the actual canter word. And whoo, and trot, whoo, good girl. Okay, so when we're talking about whip usage for the positioning, notice that my whip is pretty much always dragging along the ground in a downward angle. Even when I use it, I don't want to use it a whole lot. And most of my horses, I'm so quiet with the whip that if I get really rambunctious, it's going to kind of freak them out. But I will show you kind of what happens when you do get a little bit excited with the whip. So if I wave it like this, she instantly is like, whoa, and then she bolts forward. So one good thing is if you are normally very quiet with the whip, oh, and your horses are used to that, oh, if they do need a lot of go signal, you have a lot to work with. Oh, easy. Now, if I were to have the whip and I were to start waving it around and then not stop waving it around, she would just kind of bolt forward and just keep running. Now, I'm not going to show you that with her just because she is a little bit younger and I don't want her to develop any kind of apprehension about the whip. So I'm not going to show you what that looks like, but you can kind of imagine if you're on top of a horse and you decide that you're going to ask him to trot and then you just keep squeezing, what's going to happen? The horse is just going to go, come on, don't stop right in front of the camera. You can imagine that the horse is going to bolt forward and go faster and faster and faster until you stop squeezing. It's the same idea. Okay, so when I want to change direction, there's a couple different options. It just depends on your preference. So if I have a horse that just cannot stay off of me, I don't draw them in. I'm going to ask them for a halt. And hold. Now, she doesn't do a halt very often, so she probably will not pay attention to this very good. Hold. Hold. So I'm going to ask him for a halt, and then I'm going to come into the horse, like so, okay? And then I can turn them around. The other option you have, and this is if you have like a bridle on where you have to switch the lead or the lunge line from one side of the face to the other, or if you have like a lunge cavesson on, which is like an extra noseband piece that has a ring on the top. If you have it on either side, or where you have to switch the lunge line. The other option is ouch. When they're out on the lunge like this, you can reel them into you. And this is how I normally do her, so she's like very used to it. And then you can just switch your lunge line and then send them off in the new direction. Okay. The third option, and this one is mainly if you are in a halter and your lunge line is hooked to the bottom of the jaw on the normal lead rope ring. Again, if you have to switch that line over to the other side of their face and clip it to a new spot, this does not work. You like to stop right in the middle of the camera. Come on. So what you're going to do is I'm going to turn her as she's going. I'm not going to reel her in. I'm not going to get closer. I'm just going to turn her as she's going. So I'm going to switch my whip to my new backhand, and then I'm going to switch the line to my new front hand. Don't do it right in front of the camera. Come on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to step toward her nose. My arm's going to come out, and I'm going to lead her in that new direction. And she, again, I've done this with her quite a bit, so she knows exactly how to do that, and she does it pretty smoothly. Now that she is going in the new direction, because I was positioned at her head to make that turn, I'm going to go ahead and reposition myself to be at her hind end. I'm going to organize the rope so it's nice and safe, the lunge line or the lunge rope. I'll organize that to where it's nice and safe for my hand. And it kind of depends on your preference. So with my right hand, I don't know why I like to have the extra over in my left hand, kind of like if I was holding a lead rope, but it just kind of preference. I typically do it one way, one direction, and another way, the other direction, but you can hold it like this. I just prefer having it. Rose. So there is a really good example of what happens when you're not paying attention to your horse and you just kind of expect them to continue going forward. Now, Rose has a strong side and a weak side. Come on. and we are heading in her weak side. So if I do get positioned up by her shoulder or I get positioned by her nose, she will stop and turn around, or she'll just stop and stare at me. How to fix that, you can kind of see, was that I just stepped to the side. So what would be her inside of her body, I stepped to that side of her and then just encouraged her to walk forward, and she stepped off. So I'm going to keep myself positioned correctly here. And then I'm going to just go ahead and send her up into the trot. You'll notice sometimes I use that kiss aid. It's very strategic when I use it. It's really a just kind of, I need a little extra driving aid. And it's not really asking for the canter, it's just getting her to go forward. Now, this is kind of what it looks like when you walk with the horse. So I'm going to send her on a little bit of I'm going to have her on a shorter line because I took a few steps toward her. So she's in the same circle. And I'm just going to walk in a small circle around my center. Now my center has moved. That is not my center. The wind has taken it. I'm just going to walk in a small circle. This is easier on my hips. I kind of have a bad hip. And so standing in one position, standing in one position and twisting on my hips like this really kind of makes them hurt. So I like to just take a little bit of a walk around like this, so I don't have that torque on my hips. Now she wants to canter. I'm going to give her a little bit of a bigger space to canter in, and she's going to send forward. You can see her balance is a little wonky this direction. But the whole time I'm just sitting right at her hip, watching her body language, just making sure that I don't get in a position to encourage her to flip around. Oh, good. Easy. She always wants to slow down right there. And then when I'm ready for her to stop, I'm gonna let her get past the camera. And hold. And hold. She doesn't want to stop. She says it's too much fun running around. Hey. Ho, ho. Ho, ho. Good girl. And she walks there. Now that I'm kind of at the end of the lunge, what I can do is I have two different options when I'm ready for her to stop. I can ask her to stop and then I go to her, or I can reel her into me. I typically just reel her in. I just kind of send her in like this, and then she decides to come to me. She's not really one that's gonna like be naughty after the lunge, so I don't have any issues with reeling her in. One thing that can happen is a horse that, if you're kind of a routine lunger, you can have an issue with like the horse will decide they're done as soon as they've like kind of like cantered and worked in the second direction, and then they will stop and try to come in. You just have to be careful of that, and if they start doing that, you just tell them to keep going, and then you stop them and go into them. Kind of the same as if you had a horse that was really gate sour. Once your horse kind of stops being gate sour and you actually like walk out of the arena on top of them, if they start getting gate sour again, you just go to the center of your ring and dismount there, and then hand walk them out. It's kind of the same things. Okay, so that is the end of episode 1 of Lunging Basics. Look out for episode 2. The full video will be up on the YT channel, and then I will have a shortened version both on, actually on all of the other social media platforms. You can look for me on TikTok, you can look for me on Facebook, and then also Instagram at Jaax Equestrian. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment, reach out, or if you have any specific videos that you are wanting to see, please send it. You can email me, you can comment on any of the platforms, and I will do my best to get back and make that video. So, all right, enjoy your day.